And so while we're waiting here for a minute for all these people to continue joining, we'll kick it off in just a second. So hang on. I know people that are hanging out waiting, there's this constant, "This session will start pretty soon" thing that happens about every 5 or 10 seconds. It's pretty annoying. So it's nice to get rid of that while everybody's out there waiting.
Well, great. Well, very good.
I'm just watching the numbers kind of roll up here. Slow it down just a little bit, and we'll get going.
Yeah, we have an hour and a half, so I think we'll we'll have a full hour and a half.
Good, good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start. I mean, it's 3 minutes past, and it's slowed down a little bit, looks like. So once again, welcome everybody. I'm Joe Armstrong. This is the AIX Virtual User Group webinar series. First of all, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year. This is the first series of the year. And I can tell you, as I said in my first note, we've got a lot of very interesting sessions lined up to begin the year with. So look forward to that. A couple of things that I just want to mention before we get going here. First of all, you know, I talked about this last year, the Enterprise 2014, what typically was called Power Tech U. I'm kind of a big proponent of that. And this year, they've done a little bit differently. They're combined, so they combined Power Tech U with System Z. They called it Enterprise 2014. Now they've combined it with the storage thing as well, and it's kind of rebranded as Edge 2015, which is what the storage big conference was called. So Power Tech U is now Edge 2015. It's also not in the fall. It's in May this year. So May, I think the 6th through the 11th or something like that. So there's a link to a registration out on the AIX VUG wiki. Feel free to go out there, and actually the super early bird pricing is now until February 15th. You can get that. I will once again try to get a discount code, but haven't been able to yet. So just want everybody to know it's coming up in May, all right, not in October. Also, the presentation for today, when we get to that, the presentation for today is also out on the wiki. There's actually a couple presentations, and what we're going to talk about today is live partition mobility. And Bob Foster from Lab-Based Services is going to present for us. And first we're going to cover live partition mobility in general, and then Bob's going to cover a tool that is produced by the Lab Services, and that's an automation tool for live partition mobility, and I think it centers, Bob was telling me, around Power VM in general. So there's 2 presentations on the wiki, one for each of those. So he's going to do really kind of 2 presentations today. And then I am recording this session, so at the end of the session I will put a link out for the replay on there as well. And I'll put a link here in our chat session for where the wiki is at for those people that are new. All right. One other announcement that I'll make while everybody's coming here is I've kind of started 2015 by jumping on the social media bandwagon and created a Twitter account. So tweeting is kind of new. I've done 1 tweet so far. So not a lot, but if you want to follow really kind of AIX Virtual User Group news, you know, when the replays are out, what's coming up next, and any kind of big IBM stuff that's going to come up, feel free to follow me on Twitter at Joe AIX VUG. So there's that's out on the wiki as well. And with that, let's kind of get started here. Bob Foster, as I've mentioned, is going to present to us on live partition mobility today. Bob's got 30 years at IBM this year, so he's a longtime IBMer. 7 years with Lab Services. Before that, Bob worked in HMC development as a development lead as well. So kind of Bob's expertise in Lab Services centers around Power VM, and which includes live partition mobility. So we've got a real expert here, and really happy to have Bob presenting for us today. So with that, Bob, you've already got your screen sharing going. Take over.
Hey, Joe. Thanks very much. So hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending today. As Joe mentioned, there's going to be 2 presentations. We're going to do an overview of live partition mobility for the folks that are somewhat familiar with it, this will give them a little bit more to go on. And then we'll do, I'm going to try to do it 45 minutes and 45 minutes. In the second 45 minutes, I'm going to go over the Power VM LPM automation tool, which allows you to go into a GUI and help move lots of LPARs at one time to one or more different servers. And it's something that we just came out with back at Enterprise 2014 in October, and we just want to make customers aware of it and see if it might be beneficial to your customers, our enterprise. So, okay, so let's go. So this first one is live partition mobility. So let's go on to the next page. Well, actually, I'm controlling the screen. So the very first page in here is about where you can find more information on live partition mobility. There's a What's New page, and they have What's New pages for quite a few different topics. And so I've included the latest What's New page here for the LPM. And if you go to that page, it has the old What's New. There's also a Red Book, and this might be a little old screenshot of the Red Book page, but it's 400 or 500 pages of LPM. So we're going to try to condense some of that down, give you a Reader's Digest version of that today. So this is just sort of FYI for you. I'm going to go through some of these charts a little quickly so we can get to all the content, but you'll have the charts to go back and look at this stuff in the future. So what is live partition mobility? Well, I'll say this, it's the equivalent of vMotion in VMware. So basically we have a partition running on a P6, P7, or P8 server, and we can move it to another P6, P7, or P8 server, and there's no application downtime. The workload, the customer won't know that it's been moved from one server to another server. We accomplish this by having the LPARs that we move all be virtualized. So they're using VLS servers for their network infrastructure and for their SAN infrastructure. And to be able to move it from the server on the left to the server on the right, both those servers have to have, IO adapters are attached to the same network and to the same SAN. So, you have to have the VLS on your servers, and you have to not have any physical adapters assigned to that LPAR when you're moving it. And then have both VLS servers on source servers and destination servers on the same SAN and network infrastructure. And so this has been around since late 2007, and it's been used, I actually worked with some of the first customers in January of 2008 on it, so it's been around, I guess, 6 or 7 years now. And when we first started talking about it, I was really thinking on the bottom left, we said we're going to reduce planned downtime by moving workloads from one server to another server during system maintenance. I really sort of felt 7 years ago that was probably what this would be used for the most. And, customers were pretty cautious about filling up their Power 6s back then and stuff like that. So, you have to do a maintenance action. Maybe you want to replace a bad planer, or you need to you're going to update the firmware from you're going to upgrade the firmware from an old release to a new release. So that requires downtime on the server. So you want to get that workload off, or shut down that workload. So a lot of customers don't like you to shut down any of their partitions, whether production or test or QA. So and when you had 100 LPARs or 200 LPARs on a server, you had to have multiple lines of business agree to have the same downtime. So it was getting really hard to do maintenance. And then, that's sort of how it first started. Then on the bottom right-hand corner, they say you can also rebalance your workload. So let's say you have one server that's starting to grow on, and there's some partitions you keep on having to add more CPU or memory to it, and you're starting to fill up that server. We might want to move some partitions off of that server so you don't have to move that big partition. Maybe you move some smaller partitions to another server. So rebalancing of the workload has now become much more common, and I have customers that do it like every other day. They'll move stuff around. So so this live partition mobility has become very popular for our customers for their downtime, because it's hard to get downtime, and also just help rebalance. Next page is, this is a animation. I did not do this animation. Whoever did this animation, I give them a lot of credit. It's probably the best animation I've seen. So, and now we're going to go through this animation sort of slowly, so you sort of have a concept of how this works, and then we'll go through some of these subsequent pages a little bit faster. So on the left, you have a LPAR, and we call it AIX Client 1, so it's that upper left-hand corner. And let's say there's 7 memory blocks in there, so let's say it's got 7 gig, just so we'll just use the word 7. And this one's using VSCSI for its disk drivers. We can use this. Live Partition Mobility works just fine with NPIV also. And it's using a shared Ethernet adapter for its network traffic. And so from there, you have your hypervisor below that LPAR, and that hypervisor helps route the VSCSI traffic and Ethernet traffic into the bottom box, which is your VIOS. So this is a single VIOS example. It's pretty complicated to have this animation work. So the Live Partition Mobility works with multiple VIOSs. It works with VLANs. It works with you can have different types of VLS pairs on servers, and it works along those lines. And so we have our VLS on the left. And let's go down to the VLS a little bit. So you see your vhost here, which is how we do our disk virtualization. You'd have VFC host if you're using NPIV. Then you have a shared Ethernet adapter on the bottom right box. And on the bottom left box, there's something called VASI, V-A-S-A, and that stands for Virtualized Asynchronous Interface. And this is, if you do an LSDev in your VLS, you'll see a VASI in there. You might see 7 or 8 VASIs in there, depending on what you've done before. And these VASIs are a device that we use to actually move data from the client through the hypervisor out to the VLS. So it's not a device you manage. You don't ever want to RMDev your VASI. You don't tune your VASI. You don't do anything to that VASI. But it does exist out there. And I just want you to know that when people go, what's that VASI for? Well, it's for Live Partition Mobility and something called active memory sharing. So you do have VASIs in your VLS. And the VASIs help you perform the mover service partition, which is that other box below there. And all VLSs are built the same, and every VLS has the ability to be a mover service partition. It's just a checkbox or an attribute you turn on dynamically to make a VLS a mover service partition or not. So you have this here. And then on the right, you have a system that we're going to move the client to, and once again, it's a hypervisor. And it's got the same sort of shared Ethernet adapter, so you can see on the right that our ENT0 from both VLSs are on the same network, and our FCS or HBAs on the VLS on the left and on the right are on the same SAN fabric. So both VLSs on both systems can see the same Ethernet our network infrastructure and the same SAN infrastructure. Okay, so far so good. So, and you have an HMC in the middle that helps control it. So you do your LPM operations from the HMC. So if I hit enter here, it says what's going to happen when we start this. We're going to validate you have environment appropriate resources. On the left, we have a client that has 7 gigabytes of memory. If we're going to move it to the system on the right, it needs to have 7 gigabytes of free memory. I don't say how many CPUs are being used on the left, but I'm using 4 CPUs for this LPAR. I need to have 4 available CPUs on the right. We also want to make sure that the VLANs on the source server on the left are also on the source server on the right, and that your SAN on the left is seen on the SAN on the right. So we go off and we also validate. We validate like 40 or 50 things, but let the HMC validate, and if it doesn't like something, it'll let you know. And then on the right, once we get everything validated, we'll actually create a shell partition on the destination server, and it's going to have the exact same name of the partition on the left. And it's not running over there, but if you went off to the HMC and brought up a view of the destination server, you now see this shell partition. And it's going to be in a state, once we start going, of migrating. Right now, most of the states, your activated, you're powered on or whatever, but you'll see a state of migrating when we actually do a migration. Okay, so we create this, the HMC does all this, so everything's being done under the covers for you. And then we'll go off, the HMC and the VLS will create virtual SCSI devices. We're using virtual SCSI on the left. If we were using NPIV on the left, we create virtual NPIV. If you're using both virtual SCSI and NPIV in a client, which customers do, we create all of those. So we'll create all your virtual devices for you on this destination server. Then we'll start moving memory pages. If you're careful, you'll see that it's going down and it's going through that VASI box. You know, if you saw those M's, they're going down through the hypervisor through that VASI. So we're copying pages over. And what happens is this partition on the left is still running, and pages are getting dirtied, and we have to resend the pages over. You know, if it's a very busy partition, we'll send over, may resend some pages a lot. There's a lot of optimization in the hypervisor and AIX and System I, and even Linux to help you know what the least recently used pages are, and have a smart algorithm to moving the pages that we want to move first, and at the end we'll move the most busiest pages, so to speak. So eventually we get most of the pages over there on the right, and we say, okay, we got it done. Let's blast over these last few pages. Once enough pages have been moved, suspend the source system. So now we have all the memory that we need over on the right side to run the partition. So now what will happen is the next time the hypervisor gets ready to dispatch that LPAR, it knows don't dispatch it on that source system on the left, it's going to dispatch it on the destination system on the right. So we say that this can, if it's this may be a pause of a second or two, when we do this last little blast over of memory. We tend to go to customers and we say, start FTP sessions or SSH into your systems, or do something and start some ping tests. And sometimes a ping will be skipped, and sometimes a ping won't be skipped. So it's just a second or even less on a lot of partitions that we don't get dispatched for about a second or two, and then also we're being dispatched on the destination system. So all this is still being done, and then once we have the partition running over on the new destination, the HMC will go off and talk to the VLS. A hypervisor will delete that old partition. We'll remove the mappings from the VLS. We'll remove the virtual slots in the VLS. We'll basically clean up everything, and now System 1 doesn't know that LPAR ever existed over there. There's no remnants of it over on the System 1. Okay, so like I said, that's a pretty neat animation. So let's talk about live partition mobility control points. So the circle 1 shows us we have one HMC that talks to both the source system and the destination system, or you can have scenario 2 shown below is we have one HMC that talks to the source system, another HMC that talks to the destination system. So we call scenario 2 remote HMC. So you have both HMCs, we pass some information between the HMCs about what's going on with the migration, but then everything still flows through the virtual I/O server and the mover server subsystem on the VLS to transfer data. So you don't actually transfer the data through the HMC from server 1 to server 2. The HMC acts as an orchestrator. So we support one HMC talking to both systems. We support one HMC talking to one system, another HMC talking to another system. So here are the partition mobility minimums. Basically, it's been out since 2008, so it's been around a long time. So if you've updated your firmware in VLS in the last 2 or 3, 4 years, you're probably going to be okay. But for historical purposes, we have the minimum requirements here. I'm going to move on to the next page. That's just more some details. Okay, this next page, sort of interesting. At the beginning of this presentation, I said there's a What's New page website to find out what's going on. Well, here on the What's New website, you can find interesting things like if I want to go from, if you look on the left, I want to go from a 350 version of our firmware, which is P6, I can move that to another. If I go across the right, I can move it from a P6 on the left, and the first column I can move it to another P6. The second column is I can move it to a P7 at the 730 level. The third column, P7 at 740. So basically, you see that we enable mobility across all these different levels of firmware. So, and at the bottom you see we got 810s, and on the far, which is Power 8, and on the far right column you got Power 8. So we can go between, you know, Power 6 to Power 8, Power 8 back to Power 6 with mobility, and so that's why that's what news website has some decent charts like this that sometimes you can't find anywhere else. Okay, let's talk about some more of the requirements about our source and destination system. You have to have Power VM Enterprise Edition. This chart is old from the standpoint, you know, marketing, you know, changes names sometimes, but I still call it the enterprise version of Power VM. And that gives you, you know, there's more things that have been added to this chart since then, but you got live partition mobility is supported, active memory sharing supported. You know, this chart doesn't talk about remote restart, but that's based on addition. So, but you have to have enterprise version of Power VM on your source server and your destination server. And so people go, well, how do I know what I have? And I have been to multiple customers, and you know, there's no rule unless you have the PO that you wrote, you're not really sure. But you can go into the HMC, and this is an HMC screen here. And if you know, on your HMC, you can click on a managed system, or what I'm going to call a server, and you bring up the properties, and the properties has multiple tabs across the top. And one of the property tabs of the managed system is capabilities. And you go in there, and you can see that active partition mobility capable is turned true, and inactive partition mobility capable is turned true. Inactive means we're moving the partitions while it's powered off, while the partition's shut down. Active partition mobility means we're moving the partition while it's up and running. So those two capabilities go hand in hand. You can't just get inactive and not active. So that's part of the same enterprise code. Okay, so that's pretty simple. You can go off and see if your systems have the enterprise level if you don't know off the top of your head. Then, also, here's another screen of the properties of the server. And once again, there's the capabilities tab over off to the right. But there's also a migration tab in there. And it can show you how many inactive migrations can happen at a time and how many active migrations can happen at a time. IBM has been working on increasing these numbers up there, and it's up to 32. This is an older chart. I apologize, I didn't go out and capture brand new charts, but this is how. But this number is based on the HMC level, and it's based on your VLS level, and it's based on your firmware level. So if you have something really old, you're going to have these low numbers. If you have something relatively new, you're going to have much bigger numbers here. And what this means concurrently is that if I wanted to move 8 LPARs that are running, I can kick off to the HMC and say, move 8 of them for me, and then we'll go off and start moving 8 of them for us. If the number was 16, I could go off and say, move 16 at a time, and it'll start 16 transfers of data and create 16 shell partitions over another server and create 16 mappings, et cetera, for our for the migration. So we've been improving the concurrency over the last 3 or 4 years, and once again, it's a sort of it's a property of the HMC levels and the hypervisor levels and the VLS levels. So the newer equipment you have, the higher numbers you have. Also, from the What's New website, we have a little more information on concurrent migrations. I'll just leave this in here for you to look at, so you can go off and see what levels of VLS you're running, what levels of HMC you're running. It has a column in here called VM Control. If you're using VM Control, it will tell you what you're doing. I will tell you most of my customers are not using VM Control, and you do not need VM Control to do live partition mobility. But if you are using VM Control, this will help you understand what numbers you can do through VM Control. But you do not require VM Control to actually do live partition mobility or inactive mobility. And like I said, I want to go through the interesting charts, and these data charts you all can read later. Okay, this is a requirement here between your source server and your destination server. We have something called the memory region size, and on most of our larger servers, the memory region size is 256 megabytes. That means I can create a partition, with 1 gigabyte or 1.256 gigabytes. My granularity on my size of my LPAR is 256 megabytes. So that's what they call the memory region. Well, under the covers, we call that the logical memory block size. So you'll see both LMB and memory region referred to. And so you have to have the same memory region size on both your source and destination. So this has really been a problem in the last few years, but when we first came out with this, some of the earlier P6 models, we would have an LMB size on a low-end server of 16 megabytes. And we'd have our enterprises have always been at 256, the 795s, the 780s, 870s. They've been 256 since the first day they shipped. So what happened is I'd get someone and call me and say, hey, Bob, I want to do some LPM testing. I got my big servers over here, but I had this little lab system of a 710 or a 510 sitting around. And I want to do, can I do partition mobility between? Well, if you got Enterprise Edition, you can do that. Oh, yeah, we buy Enterprise Edition for all our servers. But you have to be careful. Your LMB size in these low-end servers, we used to torque it down to lower numbers. And you need to go check to make sure your LMB size has been set correctly. So, we used to jiggle these LMB sizes a lot more many years ago. We don't do it as much now, but that is one thing. If you're going to go from a 795 to a 510, you might want to check your LMB size. When you try to do the validate, we'll give you an error immediately. You say, hey, you got the wrong LMB size. Now the problem, and here's another picture of where you can see it on your system. You go to the properties of your server, and there's the memory tab, and there it tells what your memory region size here, and this is 256, and it's got to match. The problem is if you want to change the memory region size, you have to go into ASMI and you have to bring down that server. So that's a big deal if we have to go off and play with our memory region sizes. Like I said, light boxes are always set to the same unless you've gone in and changed them. But I haven't seen a customer that's gone in and never changed the memory region size unless they want to do some LPM from a low end to a high end. Okay, so this is something that can come up and give you that awareness if you're trying to use some system you found laying around and you want to do, you may have to adjust your LMB size if you're playing with a larger system. Okay, so let's go off to the VIOS requirements. So there's something I showed you before. I'm sorry that popped up, didn't mean to. I showed you before on that animation chart that we have something called the mover service subsystem. Well, so what happens is when you have a VLS, you can dynamically click a box on, I'll show another chart, to make it the MSP or not, and you can have more than one VLS MSP checked. And remember how that animation showed that we've transferred data from the client through a VASI. So if you have a lot of clients you want to move quickly, you'll want more than one MSP on your source and destination, because one MSP can support 8 on one VLS, another MSP subsystem on the second VLS will support another 8. So that's how you get up to these higher concurrency numbers. We're using both VLS's MSP functions to create a bunch of pipes for the hypervisor, read the information out, send off to the destination. So you will have to check the MSP box. It is dynamic. You can check it on, you can check it off, and you won't notice it really. And it says it helps you transport the partition memory, and the MSP must contain a single VASI virtual device. Once again, I've talked to you about that VASI device. Don't RMDev it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to do anything to it. But if you do LSDev, you'll see VASIs in your VLSs. And here's how you set it. This is the properties of a VLS, and it's not in the profile. It's the properties, and you just check that box MSP on, or you uncheck it, and it's not an MSP anymore. So that's pretty simple, I think, once you know that box. once again, we talked about the network before. You need to be on your VLS is on the left. Your source server have to be or have to have the SCAs, and your VLSs have to be on the same network as your SCAs on the right, so that your traffic and if you're using VLANs, your VLANs will work, and if you're in different subnets, you can just use subnets without VLANs. So no restrictions on your SCA settings. We work as long as you have the same view from both source and destination servers and your SCA, you'll be good to move between them. Talk about the LPAR. So we didn't have a chart on the SAN, but on the VLS, but once again, your HBAs have to be on the same fabric also. Okay, now we're into the actual LPAR or client LPAR. And so once again, this processor architecture compatibility. Let's spend a couple minutes on this chart. So if I'm on a P6 and I move this to a P8, that's great. When I move the partition, it's running a P6 instruction set. When it gets over to that P8, it continues to run a P6 instruction set, or P7 or P6 plus. Wherever you come from, we continue to run that instruction set on the destination server. So that sounds pretty good. And then if you want to move that partition back, it's still running P6 instructions. You can move it back to the P6. So far, so good. However, in IBM, if you shut down that partition after you move it to the P7 or P8, we will actually go off and negotiate under the covers with the AIX operating system and the hypervisor, and if you reboot that partition or reactivate it, we might put you into P8 mode. We might say, oh, you're running a level of AIX that was on that P6 that you moved over to this P8 that supports the P8 instruction set. Upon a reactivation of that partition, we'll start running you on P8, and you'll get all the great benefits of the P8 instruction set. Well, then you want to try to move that LPAR back to your P6. Well, you just reactivate it. You're now running in P8 mode. A P6 can't run the P8 instruction set. So you'll go, uh-oh, I'm in trouble here. I can't move it back to the P8 because I rebooted it, and now it's running P8 instructions, and the P6 only understands P6 instructions. So if you think you're going to be moving things among servers, P6, P7, P8, and you want to do this all the time, you would actually want to go in there and change your default processor compatibility mode in your profile of your partition to the least common denominator where you want to move. Most customers are moving between P7s. It doesn't matter. Or they're migrating from P7s, so they get new P8s in. They want to evacuate. They want to return those P7s back to IBM. They move them over to the P8. And then when it rebounces, it starts running the P8, and they're happy because they're getting rid of those P7s, or returning them back to IBM, or they're decommissioning them. So that's one thing that could catch you if you're going back and forth between two different levels, and you're starting to reboot your partitions before you move them back to where they came from. Okay. What does this show? Okay, so this is saying that I said earlier that you can't have any physical adapters assigned to this partition that you want to move. You have to use all virtualized I/O adapters. So in this picture on the bottom left, it says we clicked on the partition properties and we clicked on the profile. We were seeing the same thing, but we clicked on the partition properties and clicked on the I/O tab, and there's nothing assigned. There's no physical I/O assigned to our client LPAR that we want to move. So no physical I/O, and then on the right, let's see here. This is really on the right. You can't have a service partition enabled on the LPAR you want to move, nor can you have redundant error path enabled on the LPAR you want to move. You can have connection monitoring enabled or disabled, and you can have time reference enabled or disabled. The Red Book talks a little bit about time reference. That was, when we first started working on that, we felt that might help us quite a bit, but when we actually got everything developed, that time reference really sort of became a no-op. I've never had a customer set it for do LPM, and so I think the Red Book says it's probably optional, but it is in there. Maybe we should have taken it out as we went forward. Also on the client, if we go off to look at the virtual adapters, we do have a network, and we also have virtual fiber channels in this particular screenshot. So it's showing you that we're using virtual Ethernet and virtual fiber channel for our SAN storage on our network substructure. And we do support different VLANs, so the bottom right showing that you can use VLANs if you want to. Actually, he doesn't actually have additional VLAN tags here, but he's just talking about how your virtual network. If you're using VLAN ID 1 on your source, you better have a VLAN ID 1 on your destination. If you're using additional VLAN tags like 1000 and 1001, you need to have 1000 and 1001 over on your destination. Okay. NPIV. We haven't talked too much about storage. So if you use vSCSI, you tell your SAN storage team, I'm going to use vSCSI, please zone some ones to these VIOS, HBA, WWPN. So you go off and onto the VIOS, you LSCFG minus VPL, FCS0, and you give them that network address. So that's the actual, a physical WWPN. And so if you want to move from a server, the source server to the destination server, and you're using vSCSI, you also have to tell your SAN storage team, since I'm going to be running this workload on another server, I need to be able to have those same disks zoned to the HBA to the other VIOS. So that was, vSCSI, that's why it's been a long time, and you actually have to do that for dual VIOS, so that's, not too unusual. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. Now, what happens with NPIV, and this does happen somewhat, is you can use NPIV, virtual fiber channel, and you get a pair of virtual WWPNs, which is shown here on the right side, and they have these Charlie 0507 numbers. So those don't look like a normal WWPN of an HBA. Those are always 10 something numbers. Well, see, this is a Charlie 0 something. And so then you tell your SAN team, please zone, I need this for my NPIV client, please zone my LUNs to these virtual WWPNs. So you don't give them the HBAs, you don't give them the WWPNs of the HBAs and the VIOS, you just tell them what these virtual numbers are, these Charlie 05 numbers. Well, what happens is sometimes the SAN team doesn't want to zone all 4 of these because they only see 2 of them logged in at a time, and so they'll zone the even numbers, which is in this case 004 and 002, and they don't zone 003 and 005. So you have to tell them when you're going to do LPM, you need to zone 004 and 005 and 002 and 003. And once they just need those 4 numbers, and then you can move that anywhere within your enterprise that has that's on the same SAN fabric. So it's much easier to zone a LUN just to 4 numbers, and I have to zone them to all these different virtual SCSIs, all these different VIOSs, HBAs. You only have to give them these virtual numbers, these Charlie 0 numbers. So if you're using NPIV and you haven't done this before, and you're getting a little, make sure they've zoned both the even and the odd numbers. And this is just a property of the client fiber channel. So each one of these client fiber channels has, well, actually, this is showing 55 and 56. So let's show them both of them in that screenshot. Okay. I got another 5 minutes on this chart deck. So, this is talking about the NPIV again, and it's saying the worldwide port names, the virtual worldwide port names, float between the servers. So that's the nice thing about NPIV. You only zone it once, and then it can move between any of your servers, where vSCSI, you have to zone it to each destination server you want to move it to. So if you want to move it to 8 different destination servers, you'd have to give your SAN zoning team on vSCSI 8 different physical HBA WWPNs. So, okay, so NPIV, make sure to zone the even and the odd. I see customers that have vSCSI with root VG, and then all their data VGs are NPIV. So that looks fine too. A couple more charts here. If you're going to use vSCSI, you got to make sure in the VIOS that you have the no reserve policy turned on. This is true when you're doing dual VIOS, and this is also true when you do LPM. So most customers start with dual VIOS and they go into LPM. So if you got everything working with dual VIOS, you'll be fine doing LPM after that. If you've only been doing single VLS and you may not have ever adjusted your reserve policy, you'll need to change that on your disk for VSCSI only. You don't have to do this for your NPIV. And then this is showing you a chart again that you can use your VSCSIs in your clients at the top. In this case, they have 2 adapters. You can have more than 2 if you want it, but most customers have 2 VSCSIs in a client. And when you're using NPIV, a lot of customers use 4. It doesn't matter the number of VSCSIs you want to use in your clients or NPIVs. We'll move whatever you've defined in your client, we'll move those as part of LPM. And so it's just showing you have to have no reserve set across all these disks to do LPM. A couple other restrictions. You can't use a BSR array in your client. You have to find a customer that uses BSR arrays, so that tends not to be a problem. And huge page memories that you set from the HMC in the profile, I've never seen anybody use this. This was something put in a long time ago before we got better at what we were doing. So if you want to use active memory expansion, you can do that. You know, we didn't put a big don't use active memory expansion. We can do LPM with active memory expansion turned on. But you can't have huge pages or BSR. Like I said, you have to run to a customer and use either one of those. Shared processor pool. So when we move, if your client's part of a shared processor pool, when we move it, we'll put into the default pool by default. And if you want to actually put into a different pool, you can go in here from the HMC GUI and change it to a different shared processor pool. So you have the ability to change what pool you're going to end up in on the destination. You don't have to have the same pool on the destination. If you just want to on the default pool, we'll move it to the default pool for you.
So Bob?
Where you have to have enough. I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt you just for a minute. It seems like you're cutting out on your voice, and I think it happens maybe when you're changing screens and doing something on your keyboard there. So every now and then your voice just sort of cuts out and goes really faint.
Okay, so I'll pause before I hit the keyboard and see if that helps, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks.
So we've already talked about this, that your destination has enough memory and CPU to fit the LPAR that you're moving over there. And let's go to the next page. This is showing that we're going to do an NPIV move. You know, it's 45 minutes after the start. I want to switch over to the other presentation. I will explain to you real quick what's going on here, but I won't spend much time on it. So right now we're just going to show you we're going to move an NPIV client from one server to another, and this is what our current WWPNs are in the client, virtual WWPNs. You can go into the client and type these commands to see those same numbers in there. You see this Charlie 004 on the top and 002 on the bottom. Basically, I'm going to show you screenshots. After we do a move, it's going to be using the odd numbers instead of the even numbers. And this is still showing 04 and 02 on the source. Now we move it, and we click Validate to move it, and then it moves things over, and we'll show you this in my demonstration tool. And then she's just showing you the different screenshots, and you finally click Migrate, and then it moves the partition over to the other server. Success, we have completed the move from one server to the other server. Now we're going to log in to the other server. He's showing you that we have the same virtual fiber channel clients on the destination as we had on the source, which is appropriate. But now, when you go off and issue these commands in the client, you'll see that you're actually using the odd numbers. We were using 04 on the top and 002 on the bottom. Now we're using the odd numbers on the top and bottom. So this is how you can. So this is your VFC. We're using the evens first. When we moved it, we move the odds, and we move it again without shutting it down. We go back to the evens. You move it again, it goes to the odds. If you shut the partition down and bring it back up, we'll go back and start using the evens again first. So this is one way to see that it's been moved, and you're using the odd numbered virtual fiber channel port numbers. But if you go off and look at your FCS, it still shows your even numbers. So The previous page was showing you FC stat. Sorry for hitting the keyboard and talking. The previous page showed you your FC stat and showed you what the real numbers that you're using. But on the next page, if you do LSCFG, you'll see that we still have that 04 in the ODM there. And then once it reboots, they'll start using 04 and 02 again. So you have to look in a different spot to see the different numbers. So don't rely on LSCFG to know what the current state is after a move. Hey, end of presentation. Great. Okay.
All right.
So hold on a second.
Yep, you're going to move to the next one. Before you do, let's do a couple of quick questions, Bob.
Okay, sounds great.
While you're getting that set up, first of all, and there's actually quite a list of questions here, and Bonnie LeBaron's been helping to answer questions as well. She had a PC problem, so she's off temporarily, but she'll be back. First of all, I just picked out a couple of quickies, I thought. Shared storage pools, working with LPM. There were a couple of people that were asking if that's supported.
You're talking about the shared storage pools, not shared. Yes, shared storage pools work with LPM just fine, no problem there.
Okay. How about active memory expansion, AME?
Yes, so that works. Both servers have to have AME capabilities. Let's say you're running AME on your source. You can move it to another server that has AME on it. You can't move it to another server that does not have AME on it live. You can move it inactively, but you can't move it actively because we need that feature on both source and destination. So if both of them have it, you can do it.
Right. Okay. And IBM I. All this applies to IBM I as well, correct?
That's correct, and Linux on Power.
And Linux on Power. All right. And one other question, and I don't know how fast I don't tell you what, you can leave this for the end if you need to, but there's been some questions on mobile activations and how they work with live partition mobility. If you want to move, if you're in part of an enterprise pool, right? So for everybody, enterprise pools, you have this pool and you buy special activations for CPU and memory, and those activations can be moved by you, the customer, without IBM intervention from one system to another within your pool. So if you're doing live partition mobility and I want to move this partition over, does the activation move with it automatically and that kind of thing?
So right now, the base HMC function does not move those Power Enterprise pools automatically. This tool that we're going to go over next does move them automatically. But yeah, you're right, and the HMC team realizes that, and they're working to try to help make that easier for us in 2015. But not right now. The customer has to move the resources, him or herself, and then they can do the LPM. But my tool here, the lab-based services tool here, does actually automatically move your resources for you.
All right, super, thank you. Go ahead and take off now, and I see Bonnie is back too, so she's going to be back answering questions as well.
Okay, great, thanks, Joe. So let me start this slideshow here. So I want to show you some slides, and I'm also going to bring up the tool while we're talking about it. So let's get into this. Let's pass this. We'll just go. I'll show you the features. Okay, if we don't have enough time, I have made some YouTube videos, or I've made some videos and posted them to YouTube. And so if you go off to YouTube and search for LPM Automation Power VM, you should get 4 videos that show up. And so I just point this out to you because, we're going to go through this a little bit here. But these other ones are much more detailed on the features of it. And, I hate to say it, I can hardly sit through my 14-minute one. And, I made it. It took a long time to make it. It does take some time to sit there. But you really do get a great view of a lot of the features. And in here we also have a video of how to do Power Enterprise pools, Joe, which was the question you just brought up a second ago. So that's a tool out there. And when I say pre-GA on 3 of these is that I had the older UI, user interface, but making these videos is a little tedious, so I haven't gone back out and updated them, but the features and functions are the same. It's just look and feel. It's going to be a little bit different. But one of them actually is showing the real McCoy here, too. Okay. This is the home screen of the, well, I guess I'll give you a little briefing. So Joe mentioned before, I'm in lab-based services. I used to be the HMC architect. Lab-based services is worldwide, and we have some tools that we developed over the years, not just for System P, but for System I. And so we created this tool here called the LPM Automation Tool, and it allows you to, it's not part of the HMC, it's not part of Power VC, it's not part of VM Control. It's a, so to speak, a tar file or a zip file. We unzip it onto your Linux box or your Windows box or your AIX box. We support all three platforms, and you run that tool from there, and you can have multiple people log in and use this tool. You have multiple user IDs, or you have multiple people log in as the same ID. But anyway, so this is a tool that Lab Services has developed, and we're delivering it to customers. And it's you can see it's GUI based here, and this is what the home screen looks like. And I'm going to just get past this a little bit. And let's talk about this panel here. So basically, we'll go. This is the LPM away screen, and I'm going to bring the tool up and just show you. Okay. So it's sort of I'm sort of struggling how to deliver a screen show at the same time I'm delivering a demoing the tool. So this is the tool. It's up and running here. Let's go. Well, I just said we're going to do LPM away, so we'll have a new icon now. I need to click LPM away down here, or click LPM away up here. I click this, and so now this is the same screen that we saw in that chart deck. On the left, I need to choose which partitions I want to have moved. And so here I explode this out, and I have one HMC called Poughkeepsie HMC. So those of you know IBM, we have Austin site, Rochester site, Poughkeepsie site. And you can have more than one HMC attached to the tool. I only have one right now. I'm using a lab. I have used HMCs in Rochester and Austin, and had multiple HMCs and done things across different HMCs using remote HMC, no problem. But our lab is here. And I have about 10 or 12 servers here. Some of them are in different states of disrepair, because this is a lab, and you never know who's gone in there and done something to it. But I have this Thorad server here. And if I explode this, I have 20 clients on here. And I can choose, I want to move everything off of the server. VLSs don't show up in this list because VLSs can't be moved. These are only, your clients that can be moved. It doesn't show your VLSs. And I can click that one button and say, I want to move all 20 of these. Or I can say, well, I don't want to move 10 right now, and 9, 11, 12. And I don't click these. So I can choose either the whole server or a subset of the server. And on my destination servers, once again, I can do remote HMC, so I could have different HMCs in here and click on different boxes. But I go in here, and right now I only have 2 servers. I have 3 servers I'm allowed to use: the Thorad and these 2 Jupiters, 4 Bravo and 4 Delta. And so I click on those. I want you to see. I'm going to ask the tool, try to see if you can move these partitions from this server to either one of these 2 servers. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation, and we'll see how well this works here. So that's what this is saying. You can choose one or many destination servers. So we did that. Now what's going to happen here, if we go in here, and I'll go back to the tool, because it says now we're going to validate everything, and let's hope this is not too disruptive to you folks. So we're here. Now I'm going to go ahead and do all of them. So I'm going to go back over here on the left and say, I want to do all of them. Okay, so great. And so I hit next. So what's happening here now, I said I have 20 clients to move. But this number down here says 40. Well, I'm trying to go to 2 different servers. So I need to have 20 of these clients, make sure they can go onto one server by doing this validation test. And since I have 2 servers, that means I have to do validations to the second server. If I had 3 servers I was trying to go across, I'd have 60 validations. If I had 5 servers I was going across, 5 times 20 is 100 validations. So what we're doing here is we're going off and we issue HMC SSH commands from this tool. This tool is run on your Linux, Windows, or NIM server, or an AIX box, and it's doing SSH commands to your HMC. And we're issuing the HMC command called migration validate. You always validate, even from the HMC GUI, we always have a validate. So what we're doing here is we're going through here. I'm going to sort on the validation state column. And I have some that have succeeded. Now I'm going to resort again. I have some that haven't quite validated. That's fine. It takes about 2 minutes this morning to validate these. And so what else? I'm going off and I'm saying, well, can LPM client 6 go to Jupiter 4 Delta? That's that first line. And I'm going to see if it can be validated there. And what's going to happen, after we figure out what LPARs can go to which servers, because not all LPARs may be on the same VLAN, and maybe some of the destination servers have different VLANs, or something else going on. Or maybe one of them's using active, my source uses AME, but only one of my destinations uses active memory expansion. So the validate would succeed on one of those servers, not the other servers. So now it's finished and everything's successful. And so now, and we have warnings. These are the standard HMC warnings you see. And when you do command line on the HMC and validates, I basically ignore. I know this system well enough. I've done enough. I know that these warnings are, we're going to have a new profile, or you have an open console. Your console is going to be shut down if you're using it through the HMC VT menu. So basically, I see if I have success, and if I resort this, I'll see that they're all successful. Or else I can go through the views, and I can say I want to see 30 in a page. I can scroll down here, see they're all successes, and then I go to the next page and see that they're all successes. So that's the last 10. Great. So now the tool says, okay, all 20 of those LPARs can go to either Jupiter 4 Bravo or Jupiter 4 Delta as my destination. Let me figure out where we can put these things, because these are different size LPARs. And so this is the placement screen. I call this the placement screen. It doesn't actually say placement screen on it, but it has placement in some of these boxes here in the placement policy. Okay, so I'm going to go back over the presentation real quick and see if we're covering all the points that I wanted to cover in the presentation. Excuse me for a second. So this shows, notice how each partition is validated to both destination servers. We saw that. Okay, so now we got a bunch of good stuff about the placement slide. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the tool. And here we are. Okay, so I'm going to stay on this for a while. A lot of this is in the chart deck, but this is more fun. Here we have our different clients. There's 20 clients we're going to move. I'll change the view to show 30, but there's only 20 in here. And you see some of these clients are red and some of these are black. Well, right now a red client means it's inactive. It's not using any CPU or memory. And so an LPAR that's using no memory or CPU, it's not going to take any memory or CPU. So if I move this, right now it's at Jupiter 4 Bravo. I say I actually want it to go to 4 Delta. I moved it to 4 Delta. None of these numbers over here changed. So you see that's 2.6 and 2.35. Let's go to client. Let's go to row number 2 on the left, and you guys watch over here. So no sleight of hand going on. I'll change this from 4 Delta to 4 Bravo. And you'll see the numbers changed over here. It said, oh, okay, you just moved client 18 that was 0.25 CPU and 4 gig. You want me to place it on a different server. Let me show you how much we have now. Now look at that, Jupiter 4 Bravo. It's down to 0 megabytes. If I wanted to move something else to 4 Bravo, let me find a 4 Delta in here. Here's a 4 Delta. Let's force it onto 4 Bravo. Oh, now we're negative. So this plan that we made right now wouldn't quite work because we got a negative number here, and we can't have negative numbers. Okay, so you have the ability, we will choose a placement for you. You can go in and change the placement as you want. For example, you know that on LPM Client 18, it's part of an HA cluster, and its cluster mate's already on 4 Bravo, so you don't want on there, you'll go off and put the 4 Delta. This tool does not have any cluster-aware logic in it. You'll want to have your experienced admins make sure you don't accidentally place 2 cluster nodes on the same server, but this is how you can change it. And so we have some other options. Since we're talking about placement right now, we have we have a packing option, and this is in the chart deck, but I'm going to explain it here. So packing means I want you to put all the LPARs on the first server first until it gets filled, and then start packing it on the second server until it gets filled, and then on the third server you have 3 of them or 4 of them, etc. And you say, well, what do you do? So Bob, how do you decide what to pack first and second and third? The default algorithm is find the server that's using the most CPU first and put that on the top of the list and pack it first. And then we find the next LPAR that's got the next biggest CPU and we pack it second. So we use a memory, we pack by CPU size. There's other theories out there that maybe you ought to pack by memory size. And then there's the hypervisor actually does placement and stuff by both memory and CPU. So right now I have CPU as my deciding factor. When I pack it, I pack the biggest one first to help reduce any affinity issues that exist. Most of that stuff's been knocked out over the last couple of years, but if you're using some older servers, you still care about affinity because you haven't upgraded your firmware or whatever. But most of the customers have DPO and all that kind of stuff now. But I use by CPU. I haven't had really a request to do it by memory. We'll see if that becomes more popular. We'll add that type of policy in, but right now it's by CPU. Okay, so let's still continue to talk about packing. So right now, the tool is packing Jupiter 4 Bravo first and then 4 Delta second. I'll cancel out right now. So you see that 4 Bravo's got 2.4 and some negative numbers in it. Well, I'm going to change the order of packing, and so it's going to actually redo the placement. I'm going to click and drag this to the top. Click Confirm. It said it changed the packing order for us. And so now it packed 4 Delta first and then put the rest of the LPARs onto 4 Bravo second. And so, if we had a photographic memory, we could have seen which one of these changed. I don't, so suffice it to see we've repacked stuff here. Well, Bob, we don't want to use packing. We want to use something called striping. Well, there's a couple different ways people describe striping. Let me tell you how we do it in this tool. Striping in this tool is we have 2 servers. We find the server that has the most CPU available, so it's the least full. Let's say one server is almost full, one server is mostly empty. We'll take that largest CPU partition first, and we'll put it on that the least fullest or the most emptiest server first. And then we'll compare them and say, well, this one, and then we get the next LPAR, the next biggest LPAR, and we say, oh, well, this server here is still less full than the other server. We'll put it on that same server. So we had one server that was mostly full and one server that was mostly empty, and we get striping. We're going to mostly fill up that first server until they get to be equal, and then we'll, every time we get ready to place, we'll say which one has most CPU, I'll put it there. And of course, we also make sure we have the right memory and stuff like that. But so that's how we stripe it. So if I'm going to click on the striping button here, and we're going to see how this gets changed again. So now we're striping, and now we've got both of them are going to have over 2 CPUs left. Okay, we went back to packing. You see how one of them was almost completely full, and we can change the order again here and go back to the original order. It doesn't matter to me. So you have this ability to do this. And so you've done that, but that still doesn't mean you can't go over here and make some more changes. Okay. So you let the tool sort of give you, a packing or a striping, and then after that you can edit it some more and you can change it some more. Okay, let's talk about a couple other options here. We're doing pretty good on time. Concurrency count. How many LPARs can I move at once? Right now, the algorithm for concurrency is we have 3 servers here. We have a Thorad server and 2 Jupiters. They're not all equal because, as I mentioned earlier, concurrency count depends on HMC level, firmware level, and VIOS level. We have 2 different firmware levels on these Jupiters, and one is more powerful than the other Jupiter. And so basically the Thorad and one Jupiter are 16, but one of these Jupiters is 8. So we use the floor of those 3 high numbers. So we're using 8 right now. So I'll just leave that at 8. You can change it to one of those other numbers. Let's talk about PEEP mapping. So what this does down here is I have the term. Let's talk about the easy one first. PEEP processor pool mapping. So let's say that you have, you know that you have processor pools across your enterprise, and that's how you're doing your licenses, and you want to keep the processor pools in the same where they came from to where they're going. You click that button there, and when we move things, we will make sure we send to the agency, put it into this pool. If you're in the Bob pool on the source, we'll put you into the Bob pool on the destination. You know, if you're in the Joe pool on the source, we'll put you in the Joe pool on the destination. If you're in default pool, we put you in default pool. But so we'll keep that mapping, but we won't change the pool sizes. We won't create pools for you. We assume you know what you're doing with this. So what will happen if you click on this and that pool doesn't exist over there? When we run the tool, most of your LPARs will move, and a few of them that you forgot that you didn't have the pool over there won't move, and you'll have to go off and do another migration of the ones that didn't have pools to fit into. So that's processor pool mapping. And let's talk about, so some customers like that, I'd say about a third of my customers maybe use the processor pools, and 2/3 don't. But let's talk about the one above it. Virtual slots and HBA mappings will be retained. So this is on the LPM away, and I've had some customers say, I have a pod of systems. There's 4 servers in my pod or 5 servers in my pod. All the VIOSs are built equally. I have all these different virtual slot numbers that are unique across these 4 or 5 servers in a pod. I have the same number of HBAs in each one of these servers. I have the same number of VIOSs in each one of these servers. If I'm using VIOS server 1 and 2 on a source, use VIOS server 1 and 2 on the destination. If I'm using HBA FCS3 to route my traffic out on source, use HBA FCS3 on destination. I know that I have identically built systems, and I know I have unique slot numbers across all my systems. So, or else I have a completely empty system, and so there's nothing to conflict on. You clicked on that button, and we'll move everything exactly as it was on your source and make it like that on your destination. So definitely the customers that actually have 4 or 5 servers and one server is empty, and they actually use a rotating server strategy to where when they want to do maintenance and move everything from one server to the second server, that's perfect for them because they keep all their mappings, all their HBA mappings, which is even more important to them. Virtual slot numbers stay the same in the VIOS. They always stay the same in the client. So you have that option there. And then we have, let's say we like this placement here, but you say, I don't want you to move client 15 first. I want you to move 15 after client 1, and I want to move client 1 first. So you can go off and change the order. Right now I said I move things based on the largest CPU first. Well, here now you can go off and say I want to change the order of which LPARs I'm going to move as part of this tool. Okay, so I just changed the order a little bit, and so so good. So now let's go off and start the move. Oh no, one more chart. Sorry. Let me go back up here. We have also these choose options. So they're only activated right now on the active ones, but they mainly apply to active ones. But we have an MSP config. So some customers say, hey, I know I've been doing some LPM around for a while, and I actually have some 10 gig adapters, that I want to send all my MSP traffic over. So remember that mover service subsystem we talked in the first chart deck. that helps the VIOS, helps the hypervisor get the memory from the clients. We send that across that MSP VIOS across the network to the other one. And so what customers have done is said, I may have 4 VIOSs, but maybe only one VIOS has a 10 gig port on my source, and somewhere on the destination I have 4 VIOSs over there, but only one of them has a 10 gig port on, VIOS 4. So I want you to send all the traffic across the 10 gigabit interface, but that's much faster than a 1 gigabit interface, and the performance of your network can affect how fast your LPM occurs. So you can go in here and say, okay, on this one here, I want to use VIOS 1, and I want to use this IP address. Basically, whatever IP addresses you have on VIOS 1 will be populated here. I only have one IP address. And maybe I want to go to VIOS 2, use that on my destination. I can hit apply, and so now when this tool issues the HMC SSH command, it'll tell it to use these VIOSs. That's for this one LPAR. Now let's say that I want to do it for all the LPARs that are going to 4 Delta. I can say apply to all, so any LPARs that are going to 4 Delta now will use that same interface. So you have the ability to adjust your MSPs, and then maybe you want to change your target pool on your destination. This is the destination value here. You can go in here and choose, I want to move it to Bob or something like that, and then you can make it apply if you want to. So you can change that type of stuff through this panel over here. And okay, so I've shown you all the features. So I'm going to start a migration now. Then we're going to go back to this chart deck because it might take 10 minutes to migrate all this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And so once again, we have 20 things that are being moved. I'll change the view to show all 20. I am going to change, so I can see that we have 5 are running right now. And so even though the concurrent sound is set to 8, we're only moving 5 partitions to 4 Delta right now, so we're just moving those right now. When we start to move to 4 Bravo, we'll start to see 8. And so this is off and running. So let's go back to the chart deck now. And I think I'll stop in about 6 minutes and we'll take questions. So current slide. So we talked about the placement panel and we make changes. Here's a chart about the placement policy and what the different things do. Here's a chart about what the MSP config does and the processor pool config does. Here's a chart about how you can change the LPM order. And here's sort of what we're doing now. We're starting a migration in progress. Okay, so that's what's going on in the background with the tool. Let's talk about returning back. Well, we should be able to maybe pull that chart up while we take questions here. So we've moved things away, and now you want to bring them back. When we bring them back, we put everything back in exactly the same spot it came from. So when we push things away, you may not have the same virtual slot numbers there. You may not have the same shared processor pools there. You may not have, other similar things. But when we bring it back, we have actually kept track of what all the settings were on your source. And when we move it back, we do a very complicated HMC command and set all your values exactly the same the way they were before. So we bring them back so you can spread your LPARs off, off across 5 or 8, 10 servers, and then we bring it back. We build it back just the same way it went out. And this thing here has also got a circle around import. I haven't talked about that yet. I'll get there in a second, but you can actually save your plan in an Excel spreadsheet, edit that plan in an Excel spreadsheet, not even use the tool at all, and then this tool can read in the Excel spreadsheet and will recognize your changes and do what you asked it to do in the Excel spreadsheet. And I'll talk about this. Is basically saying when we return them, we can return them all at once, or we can uncheck the boxes we don't want to return. And we have some of the same functions in the return. We don't have all the same functions. You can't change your destination server on the return screen because we're going back to where we came from. So, but you can change the order, concurrency count, but you don't have packing or striping because you're going back to where you came from. Okay, let's talk about plans here. You can export the plans and modify them outside the tool and bring them back in. I'm going to, what's the advantage of a plan? Okay, so this is what I hear my customers doing, is that they will have an experienced system admin build a plan. Maybe they want to build a plan for Monday night, another plan for Tuesday night, another plan for Wednesday night, and then they'll have some junior admin execute the plan. So they create these plans, and they tell the junior admin, go in there and execute Monday plan. And they'll go in there and they'll import the Monday plan, and then they'll hit OK, and they can watch to make sure things happen at midnight or 2 in the morning or whatever. So that's a very good item with a plan. Also in the plans, I actually have all the HMC command lines in there. And so, you know, if for some reason, I haven't had this happen yet, you had a plan and the tool stopped working and you had to get everything moved back, you take this plan, cut and paste those command lines in the column in, or you know, I'll show you the spreadsheet, and just paste them into the HMC command line, you know, prompt, and just have them just move them back for you. So that's sort of a backup for you too. If for some reason the tool stops working, you have the plan, you know what the command lines are, you just cut and paste them into the HMC. Okay, let me, well, I think these charts are good. I was going to bring up a plan in Excel, but I got good pictures here. So here's what the worksheet looks like. It has 2 tabs. I've circled, we got an LPM away tab and an LPM return tab. These yellow columns that are not yellow in the tool, but I used yellow to help pop up more. You can change the values in the yellow columns. So you can change your destination server if you want to after you've saved this Excel spreadsheet. There's an export button on that placement page. I didn't click on it because I wanted to get through the demo. But and so you have this Excel spreadsheet. You can change these things here. And then if I scroll right in the spreadsheet, column M here actually shows you the HMC command line we're going to use.
Sorry, I'm on a conference call.
Oh, okay. That was someone's talking, but okay. Okay, so here's your command line script on the LPM away. And then here's the LPM return tab. So you see on the bottom left, I've circled LPM return. It has some fields. Now you can't change the destination server on here because we're putting it back to where it came from. So that's why column C is no longer yellow, because you can't change that because we're putting it back to where it came from. And once again, here's the complicated HMC command line to put all the slots and numbers and IDs, you know, helper IDs back together again as they were when we took them away. Okay, I'm going to do 2 more minutes here. Oh, one other thing in here, you can actually reorder those rows in that spreadsheet, and that will be the order that we run the tool on. So when we import this spreadsheet, if you save a spreadsheet and import it, and you've changed the order of the rows, that's the order that we will move things. Okay. This is also sort of saying the same thing. Power Enterprise pools. Let me say this real quick. We do support Power Enterprise pools. We can move things from a server that has Power Enterprise pools to a set of servers that are both in the same pool and aren't in the same pool. We understand what an enterprise pool is. If we are on a server that's not part of a pool and we're moving to another server that is part of a pool, we will move resources into that server if you place that partition on that server. So we do that automatically in the tool. So we'll move things for you automatically. And there's a few more charts in here. I'm going to skip this chart. We have an audit screen here to see what has happened here, a history screen. Here's how you add more than one HMC in here. And we will do the actual SSH key exchange between the HMCs to support the remote HMC, so you don't have to do that key exchange if you use remote HMC. And we can also do dynamic partition optimization is an option you can do on a tool. You can choose which things you want to move. And with that, I'm going to stop and start taking questions. And while we're taking questions, we'll go see how the LPM is going on via the tool. Okay, so question time.
Okay, well, let's start with the big question first, Bob. People are very interested in how they get this tool.
Okay, well, that's okay. So I go back to in the chart deck. That's a great question, Joe, and I guess I should have finished on that one. We have engaging with lab services. So this is chart 32. So a lot of customers, there's multiple ways you can get funding for us to come out and deliver the tool. There's no licensing with the tool. There's no maintenance fees with the tool. There's no restrictions on how many servers and HMCs you want to use. We come out, give you an engagement, and you can use it worldwide across all your data centers. But you do engage with lab services. Here are what we call our opportunity managers in this email. But Bob Foster, a lot of people already know me. They can also send me an email. And then what happens, we can use Power Care programs, deal closer programs, the direct lab. We have all sorts of different ways to fund this. And we come out for 2 or 3 days and install it there and walk you through these features and make sure it's working great in your system. And then we leave the tool for you. The tool is up on a website. When I post updates to the website, you will get notified because I'm going to register on that website. And then if you lose the tool or forget the tool, you can go back and download the tool again over and over and over. So you have to get us out there and talk to me or Stephen or Linda here, and there's our emails toward the end.
So I want to just be clear. So the way to get the tool is to bring in lab services, and they install the tool for you, and then after the tool is really yours. So everybody just understand that. This is not something that today you can just go out and download from somebody. You do this through a lab services engagement.
That's correct. Right now, that's the way we're delivering the tool. Everything's subject to change, but that's it today.
And the tool is supported through lab services. So if there's a tool issue, you don't call IBM support about it. I mean, is there somebody in lab services they would refer to?
That's right. So lab services has been doing tools for a long time. Basically, what happens, we tend to have the customers just contact the person that delivered that tool. So if I came out, they'll have my email because we would exchange emails on, I'm going to be here on this day, and you'll have questions, follow-up questions. So you would normally send an email back to the consultant that came out and delivered the tool, and then they will route it to me or to someone else, and then we'll we'll start working on it. This is a tool that's done by consultants. So if I'm at a customer and I'm knee deep in work, you're not going to get a 6-hour turnaround time if you need a fix. Okay, so. It is supported as is, but there's no charge for the tool, so it's sort of something like you might download off the website after lab services shows you where to get it from because it's hidden. Okay, go ahead,
right.
Joe.
Good. So I think that took care of a lot of questions that people had, and with that, maybe we can come back to the questions pane here, Bob.
Okay.
It's there's a lot of questions in here, so Bonnie's been busy answering some.
While you guys are talking, I'm going to return these back to where they came from. I went to the LPM return screen, and we'll just keep on talking to Joe, and I'll just click a couple buttons.
Okay. So one of the questions was the ability to specify specific HBAs when you're moving a partition, whether you want it to, on the destination, on the target, to use a specific HBA, and is there a way to specify that?
Right. So I've heard this before. What I think I'm going to work on first is some customers, if you're using NPIV and you have, let's say you have a production VLS and a non-prod VLS, and you're both on the same fabric, of course those NPIVs can be seen on both. And so customers have already, the first thing I think I'm going to work on is allowing customers to say what MSP pair, or excuse me, what VLS pair I want to go to on a destination, so that the non-prod LPARs don't get assigned to a prod VLS. So I think that's my first priority on giving some more control over the destination. The HBA gets a little more complicated because the GUI can be quite massive on that, especially if they want to change every single LPAR. So that is definitely something I do understand. What we try to do is if you're using empty servers or servers that are built identically, you can click on that keep HBA mapping, and that's going to do it. So but I know the customers still want to scroll it some more. So right now, top of my list is making sure we get you onto the right MS. We give you the ability to choose which MSP pair you want to be on, so you don't end up on a production VLS pair for a non-prod or vice versa. I do know that I've heard that other one. If I can think of an easy way to do it, I'll put it in there. But let me work. That's something to be done, but not yet.
Okay. One of the other questions, Bob, is I know you can do LPM, and we answered this question from an FSM, on a flex system or a pure flex system. Does the tool support a pure flex environment with FSMs?
So it should. FSM has the same HMC command line that HMC does, so it's the same command line. And of course, now you have the ability to attach an HMC to a flex system and do everything through the HMC. I think I attached it one time many months ago, and the command line was working just fine. But I don't test on FSM very often, and so we'd have to. If I had a customer who was interested in it, I'd go and install it, and I'd find out what level they are at, and then I'd attach to an FSM and try it real quick. It should. If it's not, we can get it to work because it's the same HMC command line.
Okay.
But all I'm doing is HMC commands. I'm not doing anything else.
I'm kind of looking through here to see which ones we haven't been able to answer yet. We talked about active memory expansion, but we didn't mention active memory sharing, which is a little bit different, and LPM use with that.
That's correct. So we are issuing HMC command lines, and if you're using active memory sharing on the source, as part of the HMC command, when we issue the HMC command to do the validate, that thing that we did before we got to the placement panel, the HMC knows that it's active memory sharing, and it will make sure that active memory sharing is supported on the destination. The appropriate reserved LUNs are there. So yes, it supports that feature. So that's there's nothing special about the command line to say this is an AMS one or not. It just says, can I move from here to there? And the HMC and the VLS and all that hypervisors will say, you got everything you need or you don't.
Great. So another question is another feature that's involved is if you're running, in a cloud with Power VC and, Cloud Manager with OpenStack and you're using LPM, what restrictions are there or what do you need to be careful of?
Okay, so that's actually an interesting question. So, Power VC really wants to be in charge of the cloud. I don't think the Power VC team would want me to be doing things like this. If it should work, I'm talking to the HMC. So if the Power VC team says you can do things with the HMC without going through Power VC, that's fine. And they say that, but I think they sort of want you to stay off the HMC when you're using Power VC. So there's nothing in my tool that would not work because I'm talking to the HMC, but I think the Power VC might, I don't know what their limitations are on people doing things on the HMC when they're Power VC managed. So that's, I guess, a question for the Power VC team that we'll try to get an answer on that. I suspect they're going to say, let us manage the cloud.
Right. So the cloud management supports, live partition mobility is part of cloud management, but doing it on the side without going through the cloud could cause some issues. I'm just not sure what they are either.
Yeah, I don't know what their policies are. That's a good question, though. That's something we'll get an answer to, Joe.
So there were some questions about, moving inactive nodes as well. And when you were doing your demonstration, you showed both inactive and active nodes, and no problem with moving those. One of the questions was, if you move a node from, say, let's just say Power 7 to Power 8, and then you put it in Power 8 stat or Power 8 mode.
Yep.
Right? So you move an LPAR, Power 7 to Power 8, you put it in Power 8 mode. So now you can't move it back to Power 7. If you make that node inactive in order to move it back to Power 7, you still have to go in and reset it back to a Power 7 mode. Even though it's inactive, it's not going to move unless it's in that Power 7 mode. Is that correct?
I don't know. That's a good question. I just have to try it. I would hope that we don't force that restriction, but I don't know.
Okay. I would think
from the stand, that's an HMC and hypervisor call. It's not a tool call, but yeah, I understand the question. I just don't know the answer.
Okay. The tool will, I mean, you mentioned a lot of AIX partitions there. I kind of assume that IBMI and Linux, they all work with the tool as well, since they all work with LPM.
Correct.
Okay. Bonnie, you've kind of been looking through some of the questions, and I have unmuted you. If you want to jump in here, go ahead.
And then I muted me. So I saw the Oracle rack. Bob, do you know if anyone's done Oracle rack of ASM? LPM?
So you're talking about just LPM in general. I know that Oracle rack does support LPM, and but you know, I know you're talking about that ASM. I think it does, but you know, we did need to. I don't know that I'll talk about. I'll have to check this Oracle release notes. Good question. Don't know.
Okay. One of the other questions on here was the movement of memory, Bob, and the question was, is it moved through the FSP port? But it's not. All the memory and everything is done on the network between the two VIO servers. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. That's a very good question. But that has had some fusion before. Yeah, basically that MSP subsystem in your VIOS has access to the Ethernet adapters in the VIOS, and that's how we send the memory across from the destination source to the destination is through the VIOS's Ethernet adapters that are assigned to it. So if you have 10 gig adapters in your VIOS, you can use 10 gig adapters to transfer the data. You got link AIX, you do that. Yeah.
And I believe that was one of the kind of major enhancements to LPM recently was supporting 10 gig and getting better speed on it.
That's right. So, well, we you know, LPM doesn't care if it's 1 gig or 10 gig, but we did make some. There's definitely been a lot of performance enhancements, and we didn't have enough time to go through all of them to you know, like triple to quadruple the speed of LPM over the last 2.5 years. And some of that is we kick off threads. You know, we only used to do 8 LPMs at a time. Well, now we can do 16 LPMs at a time, and that, you know, but you need a big network to do that. So there's been quite a few enhancements on speeding up LPM, and they do exist in the VIOS a lot, and you know, better use of creating more threads and doing better use of link aggregates and 10 gigs and stuff like that. So, and there's ongoing work. In fact, 2015 is a focus year in development for live partition mobility. So they've sort of stacked the deck to even, you know, make even more strides this year.
All right. So I see that we're kind of past our time, Bob, so I'm going to have to cut it off here. I want to thank you especially for doing the presentation, taking your time and putting it all together. I really appreciate it. Also, Bonnie, I want to thank you for being in the background here and answering all those questions. I think you helped a lot in getting answers out, and you know, you can tell that we needed you since we'll run out of time here anyway. So with that, everybody, thank you very much for joining. I'll be sending out invites for the next webinar soon, and y'all have a Happy New Year.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe. Joe, you're probably still on the line. Do you want me to not do something while you stop the recording?
No, I'll stop the recording, and then I will collect a bunch of stuff, and that's it, Bob. All you have to do is just end your session.
Okay.